or whatever. But at that time, they were literally risking their lives. So I don't know
if I can a word on that.
Yeah.
And this is a very minuscule response to a fairly broad question.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen White in the 1890s speaks of what you may call gospel reparations.
Mm.
And this is just one of a myriad of quotes that she makes about repaying blacks for slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Adventists today may share Ellen White quotes that seem to be derogatory about blacks.
Mm.
But Ellen White is very clear when she says that if the blacks are degraded in character, it's because whites made them that way.
Mm.
It's because they were enslaved.
Mm.
And so that's a very interpretive lens. That's a very important lens of interpretation. But Ellen White's idea of gospel reparations, Adventism at the time was still a very, very tiny movement.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any political power to speak of. There wasn't much money. And so she said, we need to do all in our power to repay the blacks for the great sin that whites committed toward them.
Mm.
And interestingly, she always included Adventists and Northerners in the great sin of slavery.
Mm.
She never differentiated,
Mm.
even though ostensibly no Adventists ever had slaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They made that claim several times, that nobody who holds the present truth possesses slaves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But even though they never literally had slaves, she always groups and lumps Adventists,
Wow.
white Adventists, as the guilty party.
Wow.
And we would do well to think about it, because she says ad nauseum about how the Northerners they weren't just as culpable in slavery as Southerners, but they were culpable. They were profiting from it. They were fueling it. And so she said that during the Civil War, God is repaying the North and the South.
Mm. Mm.
And she seems to say, well, she does say that God protracted the war,
Mm-hmm.
so that there will be more casualties, because he was wreaking his judgment. And interestingly, he's retributing the guilty parties through other human beings.
Mm. Mm.
We still to this day, we think that God's vengeance, his retribution, is something that only he administers. But he was administering his retribution through soldiers and through circumstances. Very interesting. I'm speaking to Adventists here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. The retribution of God is not some thunderbolt that comes from heaven.
Mm.
It is done through humans.
Mm.
But anyhow, so Adventists in the 1890s didn't have much to speak of. So she said, let's repay blacks back for slavery by giving them the gospel.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Amen.
She says when the church sort of bulked up their educational arm, she said, let's pay blacks back for slavery by going down south and educating and starting schools.
Oakwood.
Yeah, and a lot of feeder schools in Mississippi and other places.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pay blacks back by offering them medical care.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they started an entire movement of help me out, Kevin, I can't believe I can't remember this.
Self-supporting?
No,
Self-supporting?
No, it wasn't self-supporting. The little boxes that they had that you put your extra pennies in.
Oh, systematic benevolence.
Oh.
No. For some reason, I can't think of it.
Okay.
Something boxes. I'm not sure why I can't think of it.
Yeah.
But then they started giving money to the the quote unquote Southern cause, and the monies were misappropriated
Wow.
and diverted to other places. Ellen White speaks extensively, and she had visions about this.
Wow.
Visions from God, and she said, it is racist, it is prejudiced, it is discriminatory that you have funneled the monies, particularly for the needy blacks in the South,
Right.
for evangelism among whites.
Wow. Wow.
And so my point is this, her idea of reparations to blacks was broad, but for those who couldn't do anything else, she considered teaching literacy, other skills, healthcare, and preaching the gospel as a type of reparation for what Adventists did by enslaving blacks.
I want to say something right here. There's a